when you provide services to places like Watch People Die, when you provide services to places that are spreading ISIS propaganda, you become a part of the actions that are inspired by these websites or these messages, right? You are providing support to the celebration of violence, to extremist actions, and so I think we need Cloudflare to take action on these individual sites before we get to the point we did with 8chan and with Kiwi Farms, before the blood hits the ground.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me for this episode of Hate Comes to Main Street. If you like what you see here, be sure to hit subscribe. My guest today is Daniel Kelly. He is the Senior Director of the ADL Center for Technology and Society. I wanted to talk to him about a new report that highlights the role of a major technology company in sustaining websites that have been linked to some of the most heinous acts of violence not only here in the US, but across the globe. That report is titled Keeping the Lights On: How Cloudflare Sustains Violent Extremism, Graphic Violence, and Terrorism Online. I began by asking Daniel to tell me exactly what is Cloudflare.
So Cloudflare is an internet infrastructure company. And so what they do is they provide a series of services to different websites or web hosts to keep their website on the internet, right? So, everything that you use, whether it's a Facebook or a YouTube, right, exists on the internet. And underneath that is a layer of internet infrastructure that holds up that website or that platform, protects it from cyber attacks, these kinds of things. So Cloudflare is a publicly traded company that is one of the sort of main providers of internet infrastructure. And the reason we decided to focus on this, and why we've been focused on them for a few years at this point, is that they, famously have provided services to some of the worst places on the internet, right? And famously also, they have not added a policy that makes it that so that they're deciding who they do and do not provide services for. And the times in which they have cut off their internet infrastructure services for these terrible places, right? Places which are, in and of themselves, like their only purpose on the internet is to celebrate violence and spread hate. Places like Kiwi Farms or 8chan, right? In the past, these are places that, after there were mass violent events or credible threats of violence, only at that point did Cloudflare say, okay, we're going to take action, right? And remove services. But at no point did they make it systematic. At no point have they created a policy. And we've engaged with them for several years, and they haven't made any changes to their approach. So that's why we put together this report, which speaks not just to the previous actions they have taken, but the websites that they currently provide services to, which are some of the most heinous, horrible places online.
And just to back up just a bit to the technical side, if a website does not have Cloudflare, what's the significance of that? What happens to that website?
So I think one of the main ways in which people utilize Cloudflare is for their cybersecurity protection services. And so if people don't subscribe to Cloudflare's cybersecurity protection services, or alternatively, if Cloudflare denies them service, then they will be vulnerable to various cyber attacks that could take a website down, right? And so one of the arguments that they do make to us, right, and to others is that, everybody should have access to these kinds of protection tools, and that it shouldn't be that just because that it should be a utility, right? That to have protection from these kinds of cyber attacks, and that we shouldn't one company shouldn't decide who is vulnerable to cyber attacks and who isn't, right? I think that's one argument. I think we would make an argument that Cloudflare as a company, right, just like every other company in the tech stack and every other actor in society, needs to have a set of principles and values about who they will and will not provide services to, right? Just saying, oh, I'm a neutral pipe, I'm a neutral actor here, then you are giving cover to those whose sole mission is to celebrate violence and spread hate, right? And we need every actor in society to take a clear stance against these kinds of things.
Now, well, one of the websites highlighted in your report is just a horrific website called Watch People Die.
Yeah,
I unfortunately had to go on there for a project recently. For those who don't know what this website is, what is Watch People Die?
sure. So Watch People Die is a website which is essentially the name of the website, right? Where people, often young people, go on this website and sort of build community around the act of watching acts of violence, on video based acts of violence, and having community around that. And this is a website that is also filled with white supremacy, with anti Semitism, with violent misogyny, and other forms of hate that is circulating alongside footage of violence, mass shooting, terror attacks, these kinds of things.
Yeah, and so, like for example, the shooting at the Islamic Center in San Diego,
Right.
I found the video on Watch People Die.
Yep.
The school shooter we had here in Nashville, Solomon Henderson, had been
Right.
on Watch People Die.
Yep.
It's where school shooters and mass killers are born. Is it not?
Yeah, I believe it has been tied to at least six shootings thus far. And it's definitely a place where sort of shooters have communicated, sort of hardened their beliefs, and they were sort of a part. We created sort of a timeline project recently that goes into the journey of a bunch of these sort of mass killers, and part of that journey was this website, Watch People Die.
What are some of the other websites that are highlighted in the report?
Sure. So I think there's at least two incidents so there's on the one hand, there's Watch People Die, which is, extremely heinous and horrible, but not necessarily illegal content, right? On the other side, you have propaganda outlets for ISIS, right? And so these are designated foreign terrorist organizations, which goes even a step beyond the kinds of things we're seeing with Watch People Die in terms of a legal precedent, right? And that's those are the kinds of websites that are on there, as well as Documenting Reality, which is another similar site to Watch People Die, and also it provides services to the largest sort of incel forum on the internet. So this is a culture of people who are engaged in sort of violent misogyny, and so all sorts of forms of hate. So it isn't Cloudflare isn't making a call necessarily that one of these is worse than another. They're just sort of providing services, whether it's Watch People Die, whether it's incels, whether it's ISIS propaganda. All of these are under the umbrella of its services.
So, we've seen over the years that going after extremist websites is a bit like a whack-a-mole.
Sure.
Uh, so, if Cloudflare were to yank its services, would these websites just come up with another way to stay online?
I think so. They would, right? And some of the websites that Cloudflare has acted on have, but I think it would be a significant disruption to their online presence. And what we've seen in the research is that when disruptions happen, when websites go down, a percentage of that community disperses, right? And these websites come back, maybe they reform in some, but the actual community does, is scattered when these actions happen. And so, we think there is um it's not the cure all to this problem, but it would have a significant effect. And it would say, that Cloudflare as a company has values, right? That hate and extremism don't have a place on its services. And I think the more that we can push these kinds of movements to the fringes where, publicly traded companies aren't the ones that are providing them services, I think the less of a hold these kinds of movements will have on our society.
So you alluded to this earlier, but ADL has gone to Cloudflare and basically has Cloudflare even engaged?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been in conversation with them. There was a group that we did a convening with a bunch of different internet infrastructure companies and several years ago around what would it take to get internet infrastructure as a company as a sort of a set of actors to take more responsibility, right? And I think one of the things that they came back with at the time is I think a really fair point, right? Which is when we're talking about internet infrastructure, we're really talking about an on-off switch, right? When we're talking about social media, on Facebook or on YouTube, a platform can come in and take a video, right? One video or one video within an account that's otherwise fine or something like that. When you talk about internet infrastructure, you don't have that kind of scalpel-based approach, right? You're really talking about when do they throw the big switch that says this thing cannot be online anymore? And that's really, and we think obviously there should be different lines for what an internet infrastructure company should say. We're going to throw the big switch, and so we think for the websites in the report, um, the ISIS propaganda sites, watch people die, incel forums. These are places whose sole purpose is to spread a hateful ideology to encourage violence. And that shouldn't be a hard, that should be a line that a company like Cloudflare and other internet infrastructure providers should be able to draw. But historically, our experience has been that internet infrastructure providers don't want to do that, and so, that's why we're pushing on one of the bigger actors here with the hope that they will act, with the hope that it will inspire other internet infrastructure companies to follow in their footsteps.
And is there anything that people watching this can do?
You can definitely write your members of Congress to tell them to take action to push Cloudflare to act here, right? There are letters that members of Congress can send to actors like Cloudflare to say, hey, why are you continuing to provide services to these kinds of places? And I think also just being like, I think in the day to day of people who are uh, who are interacting with young people who maybe come across these sites, like be in conversation with the young people in your life about the places they are spending time online, right? Just like you wouldn't, ignore like a new playground, right? That your kid ends up at, or a new part of town. You should talk to them about like, hey, where are you spending your time online? Who are you talking to? What are the places that you are, right? And if it ends up being one of these places, I think that's an important flag for folks to be aware of where young people in their lives are spending time online.
Last question. What would be your message to Cloudflare about the consequences of them not addressing this?
Sure. So I'd say that they are y- I think their argument is that they are a neutral pipe to the internet that is just providing services to everyone. But I'd say that when you provide services to places like Watch People Die, when you provide services to places that are spreading ISIS propaganda, you become a part of the actions that that are inspired by these websites or these messages, right? You are providing support to the celebration of violence, to extremist actions, and so I think we need Cloudflare to take action on these individual sites before we get to the point we did with 8chan and with Kiwi Farms, before the blood hits the ground. And we need Cloudflare to make systematic reform so that they can, way before we get to the point of any of that, they can establish a set of values of who is allowed to use their services and who isn't, right? and a clear line for what they want to support and what they don't, so that to be, in so many ways they are a leader in the industry, but in this way they are absolutely not, and so they need to step up and do better.
Well, Daniel, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.